is windy. Wow, okay. I mean, it was raining last night, so I guess that shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but yeah. Whew, okay. Alright, so I'm gonna restart this live so that we have enough time to talk about the things that we are going to talk about today. We got Mr. Dennis Ray jumping on a little bit. He had a really interesting Instagram post that I wanted to talk to him about. He was mentioning plant medicine versus pharmaceuticals, and I'll let him jump on first so that we can get his perspective. And meanwhile, let's talk about how there is an inherent need in every human being to create, but we aren't really encouraged to do that. Like, we don't really value creativity in mainstream US culture. Like, we value building things, we value things that are useful, but like, we're overly utilitarian, I feel like, because it's more like, okay, how is this physically useful to me? You know? Like, it's more about, like, is this physically useful to me? Like, art is spiritually useful, art is emotionally useful, art is useful for building communities or for just making life better, you know, like becoming more spirited as a human being. And we don't really acknowledge that as much unless you're actually a part of a creative community, which a lot of people aren't. Creative communities tend to be pretty small. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to start talking about these things in my lives, because it's important to me to acknowledge the parts of our humanity that are discouraged by our culture. We're discouraged from being too individualistic, which is prevalent in most cultures, to be honest. But my thing about that is you can be authentically yourself without being an asshole, you know? Like, you have to balance authenticity with social graces. And I feel like when you downplay your individuality too much, it's not good for your mental health. You know, it's a cause of anxiety and depression in a lot of people if you don't feel seen. And the way that you feel seen is you bring your authentic self forward. You express yourself. So I think that's super important. It's, you know, how you become more spirited as a person. Like, art makes you more spirited. Religion, spirituality makes you more spirited. It makes you happy. And, you know, that's important. Serotonin and dopamine are important, y'all. But when it comes to drugs in our culture, that's another thing that is almost like a supplement for spirituality. I do think that, like, you know, we have different ideas of what medicine is for, depending on the culture that you're in. It can be recreational or it can be medicine, you know? But anything that makes you happy is medicine, I feel like. I'm not encouraging drug use, y'all. Like, I don't know, stay in school, whatever the fuck. But I'm just saying that it's important to make yourself happy, and it's important to create your own joy. And that's an important part of just being a person. A lot of the time people are encouraged to follow a specific path that's outlined by your society, by your community. And a lot of the time, that path, it's not who that person is. Like, it's something that they were pushed into instead of following their individual path. And I'm really big on the idea that every human being was given specific gifts for a reason. And when you follow those gifts and you follow that internal calling, that's what your path is. That's, who you were meant to be. When you follow other people's advice too much, you tend to lose yourself. That's what happened to me. Like, I lost my soul like 3 times. And I can explain that more if y'all want to get into it. But yeah, like, you literally lose yourself when you're trying to listen to other people instead of listening to yourself. Especially because I feel like as human beings, we are social creatures. Oh, my hair is not cooperating. But as humans, we're social creatures, and we are supposed to be a part of a community. We're supposed to be expressing ourselves. We have to balance those two. It's always about balance. But as human beings, we are social creatures. So we automatically copy the things that are around us. It's it's inherent in every human being. We tend to copy the things that are around us. So I feel like individuality should be stressed more, because since we automatically copy the things that are around us, we need to validate individuality more, because it can be lost very easily. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Doing well. It's a good day so far.
Oh, good. It's hella windy, but it's kind of nice. Like,
Yeah. What part are you in?
I'm in the Midway District.
I got it. Okay, I'm downtown. It's pretty chill. Yeah, like the sun is out, but it's cloudy. It's nice.
It was raining last night, so those clouds are going to take a minute to get away. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was raining pretty late too, like around, I don't know, somewhere between like 10 and 2. It was like it was rainy, it was foggy. I enjoy it when we get it.
Yeah, it's like relaxing to fall asleep too.
Yeah, I had my balcony door open and the breeze was blowing through. It was nice.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your Instagram post or your Instagram story you had a couple of days ago.
Okay.
Like, you mentioned like that like plant medicine was overtaken by pharmaceuticals, and how
Mm,
like the spiritual context of that is important. Can you talk a little bit about that?
yeah, sure. So the post was just saying, which, I absolutely agree with, that there was a concerted effort to conceal the benefits of plant medicine and, what it can do for us mentally, physically, spiritually, like a concerted effort to conceal all of it, really en route to the path that we're currently on today, the pharmaceutical industry, right? We're pushing meds for every problem that we have, and then we have meds to deal with the symptoms of the meds that they gave you for the problem, and it just compounds and compounds. So that's what the video was really talking about. And if anyone has ever, experimented with any type of plant medicine, it's highly likely that you realize the benefits that came with it, from a clearer mind to a lighter heart, right? And so, just starting to tap into some of those benefits and the reasons that it's illegal now, is, primarily so that we're still pointing in the direction we're pointing at, towards the pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah, no, I 1000% agree with that. Like, there was a whole thing in, I want to say, like, even the 1800s, where
Mm,
like apothecaries and stuff like that, where more leaning towards how to make money versus how to heal a community. So it
Mm-hmm.
always comes back to how to make a profit and how to make businesses bigger. It's less about like, how can I heal people? So that's one thing I really wanted to talk to you about because, like, when it comes to our culture, we're so focused on money that we don't really take care of people.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when it comes to the spiritual aspect of it. Like one thing I talk about a lot on these lives is how the spirituality was taken out of religion because it's more about like how do I um, make sure a population is in check instead of acknowledging the individual. Because if you're not acknowledging your individuality, you're probably not going to be a very healthy human being. Like, if you're always giving pieces of yourself away, you're not feeding your own self, then you're probably not going to be healthy later on.
Yeah, it's funny this balance between like finding our individuality, but then still remaining a part of the collective, right? And I feel like
Yeah.
we have gotten so far off track on both of those to the point you're speaking to. Like, we came here to be ourselves, right? And there's so much beauty when we learn to be ourselves. And that's the beauty in the individuality. It's like where you get to be your full self and I get to be my full self. And when we put those things together, that's when we as a collective are better. But you're right, individuality isn't exactly encouraged, really, in any of our systems. Is not encouraged, in our education system. It's not encouraged, even in our family systems, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
still
Mm-hmm.
very much about what the culture wants you to do, what your parents want you to do, what's going to make money. It's tied to all of those things. And as we focus on all of those different aspects, we actually get further and further away from our core selves. And
Mm.
thankfully, I think people are starting to wake up to that and tune into that and try and find their way back home to themselves. But it's not something that's encouraged by our society at all.
No, not at all. Like one reason why I feel like witches became like more of a thing in like modern day is
Mm-hmm.
because people crave that different aspect of spirituality. Like people want to be able to acknowledge their individuality more days. And when like the 90s rolled around, I feel like there were like witches everywhere. Like Charmed came out, the witches
Mm-hmm.
of Eastwick came out, like maybe it was 80s, but like 80s, 90s area.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that was for a very specific reason. Like, in the 60s and 70s, people were trying to break out of that conformity more. They were trying to be more spirited in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like spirituality isn't just like this abstract thing. It's about like what feeds your spirit, what makes you happy, what makes you spirited as a human being. So, like, I always say like art is a spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you are a human being, you probably are creative in some way. Even if you say you're not creative, you're creating your own life. You chose your outfit this morning. You created your outfit this morning. You created how you looked this morning. So, well, I mean, I didn't, but, 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 like, most of the time, you create how you look that day, So, um, yeah, like that's one thing I've been thinking about recently. And the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that post of yours was witches, because that's something that like I've been studying a lot recently. And especially because I'm Irish, I was thinking about like, Irish like paganism and like all like the witch trials and stuff like that. Like a lot of cultures in like my cultures anyway, like German, Irish, like all of those, like we do have like these plant-based medicines. We do have like these old traditions of worshiping nature, but all of that was overrun by like pharmaceutical companies, by using monotheism, Christianity, and Judaism as a form of control instead of a form of spirituality. And when the witch trials rolled around, like that was a thing that, like, was another form of Christianity, like trying to control a population. It was like these people were plant healers. They were like, medicine women and men, but people didn't understand it. The people in power didn't understand it. So they had to make sure that these people were wiped out. Because if you are a healer, there are people who are going to flock towards you because we are all in need of some form of healing.
Hmm.
So the fact that people were going towards these people, these medicine people, instead of going to the church for advice, that was a threat to their power. So I feel like that's like one thing that always comes to my mind when I think about pharmaceutical companies and how we got here today with like the opioid crisis and stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I had the same thoughts. Like when we go back to our primitive cultures, our indigenous cultures, right? They weren't pushing meds, right? They were using things that the earth supplied to heal themselves, right? And connecting with the spirits to heal themselves. And all of those things, through one form or another, have become very taboo in many cases, such as the plant medicine, right? Is now become illegal. And now that the government is like starting to find ways to capitalize, right? Which we'll talk about capitalism in a second, because that's
Mm.
really the reason that I think is, I think that's behind all of this is money,
Yeah.
right? But I
Mm.
think when, they're starting to figure out how to capitalize on these medicines. And so now we're getting back to the point where the research is happening in the plant-based healing, into all of the kind of research that was previously, even the research on it was forbidden,
Ooh,
right?
yes, yes.
Like they didn't want to look into the benefits of it because they didn't want us, the people, they didn't want the people to realize and understand the benefits of it because that hurts the pockets of big pharma. And so now that they're starting to kind of tap into that, now the research is continuing, right? Now they're starting to look into the benefits and start to you know find out all of the things that the indigenous cultures knew way before we even tried to do any type of research on it. So everything is coming full circle. But yes, I believe it was a concerted effort to keep that kind of stuff from us. Not only so that we're unable to heal ourselves, but so that we're unable to tap into ourselves and find out who we are and find out our power. Not only is it about capitalism and making money, but it's also about suppression, right? They don't want us to
Mm.
understand who we are and what we're capable of because, again, um, when we are divided, we cannot stand, right? And so there are, I believe,
Mm.
concerted efforts to keep us at a certain level. And plant medicine, along with other indigenous practices, will help us kind of pull out of that and really start to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah, no, 1000%. Like you said, people are more easily controlled when they're in a state of depression. When you're
Mm-hmm.
happy, when like you're in good spirits, it's harder for people to control you because
Mm-hmm.
you're more likely to be like, okay, you can fuck off. I'm gonna do me. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
more likely to be happy. And like you said, like happiness is a form of empowerment. Like it's also a form of like creating community because like there's trauma bonding and stuff like that. There's
Mm-hmm.
like people who like get into relationships because they have the same kind of trauma, but those aren't healthy relationships. When you bond with somebody in a happy environment and you can actually see each other, like you bonded over like all these positive experiences together, that creates a community that's healthy. So having all these positive experiences together, like that creates a community that like you said, threatens the power structure because a lot of our power structure is built on keeping you spiritually weak. Like you might be in like an academic field, you might be have a PhD or whatever, you might be mentally strong, but you are spiritually weak because you're not actually yourself. And that's where the whole power of conformity comes in. When everybody's the same, ooh, okay, so there was like this conversation I had like a few days ago or like last week or something. And we were talking about how if everybody has a different definition of power, then who's actually in power?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's this thing, going back to it, where a house divided against itself cannot stand, right? And
Mm,
again, going back to the bad piece about individuality, right? And we look at this on a national scale, right? When each country is only looking out for their country, right? We're not looking out for people who are not like us. We're only concerned about ourselves. That's where individuality really can do us a detriment, right? Or can become a detriment, because we aren't focusing on the oneness between us. We're focusing on the differences between us. And as long as we continue to focus on the difference between us, like, we cannot stand together. And if we are naive enough to think that they don't understand that, or that there are systems in place to keep us from coming together, then I think it's just time that we take a deeper look at the picture here.
yeah. I mean, like you said, when you're looking at a different country, you're more likely to see the differences between you guys than the similarities. But one thing I want to push back on just like a little bit is like I
Mm-hmm.
actually really love being around like different ideas. Like maybe that's just like because like that was my upbringing. Like I
Mm-hmm.
was always encouraged to take in different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like you should be looking out for like everybody. But I do think that when you are around different ideas, then that can be like a healthy exchange. Like when you focus on the differences instead of the similarities, then that's how you learn from other people, I feel like. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, I
I do.
completely agree with that. I completely agree with that. I think there's beauty in our individuality, but it's when we use that beauty for our good, that's when the benefit happens, as opposed to when we use those differences to keep us apart, right? It's In my head, it's beautiful having different cultures, right? I'm black, I have a lot of Mexican friends, Filipino friends. Like, learning about those cultures are beautiful. But when we get to the point where my culture is better than yours and your culture
Mm.
has these deficiencies, that's where it starts to pull us apart more than keep us together.
Oh yeah, that's like an ego thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this and it works for me, and because it works for me, it's better than whatever you're doing because
Mm-hmm.
we're doing fine over here.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's weird to me that like people, well, maybe not weird because, people will do what works for them, I guess. But what's crazy to me is when people think something is working for them, but it's actually not. Like, one thing that like I've personally been dealing with is like unpacking things that used to work for me, but they don't work for me anymore. Like I'm a different person than who I
Mm-hmm.
was, like even like last year or even like 2 years ago. So what used to work for me doesn't work for me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like funny to me that like people will like stay in this state of comfort or stay in this state of stagnation even if it's not good for them. Like oh, like my culture is better than yours. Well, maybe your culture isn't working for you. Maybe you're just like comfortable doing what you're doing. And nothing wrong with comfort, nothing wrong with um like I don't know, like not wanting to step outside of what you know, I guess. But I feel like that's something that breeds mental illness and resentment against the people around you after a certain amount of time. Because when you're always around the same thing, then you get frustrated with the people around you sometimes. Like, girl, I need a break from you. Like, we need to take some time away from each other. Um, I don't know. Like, I've been thinking about that like recently. Like my, like what because it's working for me, it's better than your thing. But just because it's working for me doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And I think ultimately what we're speaking about is like the yin and the yang, about individuality, right? And the collective. But I completely agree that, what's working for you now may or may not work in the future. And so I think we have to be open to we have to be open and gentle enough with ourselves to say, this worked for me at one point. Now maybe I need to try something different, and being humble enough to try that, and being humble enough to learn from other people's experiences without necessarily feeling the pressure to adopt it as your own, right? But I want to hear what's working for you, because maybe that'll work for me too, or maybe some pieces of that will work for me, right? And I think that's where the communication has to be there, right? I try to live from a place of, my way is not the right way, the best way, or the only way. It's the way that works for me right now. And
Mm.
I can learn something from somebody else that may work for me better. And I can share what's working for me with other people without the expectation to say, this is how you should do it. I don't know that. You're a whole different person than I am. So we have to
Yeah.
have like this balance between finding what works for us, and still being open to hearing what works for other people.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I love about creative communities, especially because like it's kind of like how like if you're making a painting, then it's like, okay, so how can I make this look better? How can I like evoke more emotion in this painting?
Mm-hmm.
Like if I only stick with what I know, maybe I'm not going for like the best possible way this painting could be. Maybe I like need to study like this artist, you know. Maybe this artist will be the perfect like little piece that I need to make this painting that much better. And if I have like all these like different perspectives, like you said, I can find what works for me. Like maybe like my parents didn't tell me all the things that I needed to know. Maybe like my school didn't teach me all the things that I needed to know. Maybe my friends are stupid and they don't tell me all the things that I need to know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's definitely important when it comes to like actually finding out what works for you. Because no one can tell you what works for you. I used to be that kind of person who was like,
Mm-hmm.
guess what? This is what your problem is. You're doing this, 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 and this. Make sure you get your shit together. Like, make sure you like stop doing this.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I had to realize with one of my best friends, especially, is that like she's going to do what she's going to do. And I can't tell her anything. I can't help her in any way because she needs to go through these mistakes to learn these things for herself. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell her things because she might process it like in her mind, but she's not actually going to take it in the same way that she would if she actually had these experiences.
Yeah, you're 100% right. As you're talking, I'm even thinking about my son, right? And how the conversation applies to parenting. And I try and approach it the same way. Like, I'm not going to tell my son what's going to work best for him or what he should do. That's not my job as a parent. I can share my experiences with him and say, here's what worked for me. And I can help him find different tools and resources about what may work for him. But I won't push my ideas, my beliefs, my practices on my son. He is an individual soul, just like the friend that you were just talking about. They are their own soul, their own person. Our job is not to, tell that person what's right or wrong for them. Our job is to support that person, love that person, and help that person discover what does work best for them. But not to be the authority on, what is or should not be happening or what's the right way. Like that's I when people approach me like that, I'm already like put off, because you don't know me. You don't know my life experiences,
Yep.
right? You don't know my background. You don't know my struggles.
I'm going to do the
When I,
exact opposite of what you're telling me to do just to piss you off at that point.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't conform well when people tell me what I should do or how I should do it. Like, nah, I'm gonna do me, and you do you, and we'll be happy together.
Yeah. No, I feel the exact same way. Like, I don't know. It's funny. Like, you know how like you can tell when some people are friends, like they have like a very similar vibe, they like, have similar style or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have friends like that, but there are some people I get along with well who have nothing in common with me. Like I
Mm-hmm.
can't explain like why like we get along, but we just do. And that's like something that like you said, like with your son and everything, you're your own individual person. I'm my own individual person. And I feel like those are when authentic connections can be achieved. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you're not your authentic self and the other person isn't their authentic self, you're not actually communicating. I feel like you're not actually having a dialogue or a conversation. It's like, I'm agreeing with you to keep the peace, or like, I'm going to agree with what you're saying because like, I just want you to go away. Like, you're not actually
Hmm.
communicating, you know? And that's, you know, important. Like, I feel like a lot of the time we're not encouraged to speak for ourselves because we're encouraged to keep the peace.
Hmm.
But sometimes conflict is a good thing. Like, I think having those open conversations and those conflicts are a very good thing sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's where it comes down to boundaries, right? And one,
Mm.
knowing who you are and what you are and are not willing to accept. But I think it's the space from which the conversation flows. You know, if we're having a conversation to learn and to grow, like those are healthy, productive conversations. But if we're coming from an ego perspective, right? About what's right and what's wrong and what should be, like that's just not the way to it's not the type of relationships I desire to have around me. You know, I desire to have people around me who are comfortable in their own skin, and they're so comfortable in their skin that they allow me to be comfortable in my skin, right? You
Yes.
know, like a simple example I'll use, like, like hanging out with friends and people are taking shots or drinks or whatever they want to do. And some people like really need somebody else to like take a shot with them or like have a drink with them or do what they want to do. Like, I don't want to conform to what you want to do. I'm not going to ask you to do what I want to do. If I want to take a shot, if I want to smoke, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it. If you want
And
to
I'm
do
not
that,
going to have a good time if we're like, you're telling me to do something.
exactly. Like, just do you, and be happy with that and just let me do me. Like, those are the authentic connections. And I think that same type of connection kind of transcends into healing as well. Like, tell me what works for you, but allow me to do what works for me because, again, we're different people.
Yeah, that's a whole form of healing in itself. When you're actually allowed to just be yourself, like
Hmm.
that's a whole form of healing by itself.
Hmm.
Like when you're told like you need to be this, I feel like a big source of mental illness is when you're not allowed to be your authentic self. When you're trying too hard to like do something else for other people because you're not acknowledging the things in yourself you need to work on, or you're not acknowledging what makes you happy. Like that's grounds for mental illness and psychopaths, like right there, you know?
Yeah, talk about it. A huge reason for the anxiety, the depression, it's like you said, it's because people are trying to fit themselves into a box that they really don't fit in, right? And maybe they're afraid to step outside of that box because it goes against their culture or it goes against their family or it goes against some of their beliefs, right? And so those things and people and systems are keeping them trapped, and that's when the soul starts to. I'm speaking from experience, by the way. It's what sent me to
Oh yeah.
therapy, right? Because I was trying to learn how to be myself and break away from all of these cultures, these practices, these beliefs that have been ingrained in me since I was a child, right? And I'm in a great program right now with Martha Beck. It's called Finding Your North Star, but she talks about this specifically about how sometimes even our cultures can stop us from becoming who we were sent here to become because we are trying to fit into these boxes. And again,
Yep.
we're forced to check these boxes because, again, they help us or they cause us to focus on the differences between us as opposed to, the similarities. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think these conversations are so important because these are the things that not enough people, in my opinion, are truly talking about. But these are the kind of conversations that can really change the world when we start to focus on the beauty in our individuality and really looking at how we can use that to make a better world. Because to your earlier point, like if everybody's thinking the same, that's not how you progress, right? You progress
Mm.
because somebody is thinking differently. Somebody is thinking outside the box. Somebody thinks the impossible is possible and they're going for that. And again, when we encourage that type of individuality, that's where it starts to benefit the collective, and I,
Mm.
I think that that's important.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of the reason why I started having these conversations on these live streams because
Hmm.
I've wanted to do these conversations for a long time.
Hmm.
And I've started having more of these conversations with my artist friends, especially recently.
Hmm.
Like when I moved to San Diego, I met so many different people who were like more my people. And this is like my favorite place I've ever lived because of that, because there are
Hmm.
so many creative people that I can talk to about this stuff. And I feel like everyone thinks about it, but not everyone knows how to talk about it. Like these conversations usually happen in artist communities or in spiritual communities, and not everyone is a part of those communities. Like there's a reason why all the artists in San Diego know each other. It's
Hmm.
because those are like tight knit communities, or maybe like not everyone is close, but like everyone knows each other because like creative communities are about connection, and it's about like how like you connect with other people. And a lot of the time, like those are small amounts of people outside of those communities, outside of those like give and take like communities. We don't really have those conversations. We're not like taught how to have these conversations. And one thing that just popped into my mind was I was hanging out with my cousin from Wisconsin one day, right? And
Hmm.
she was talking about how she was just like craving a really good conversation. And I was like, a conversation about what? And she was like, I don't know. Like, I just want like a
Mm.
good conversation, but I don't know like what. And like, I talk a lot, or I can talk a lot. But she was like, no, but I don't want to talk about that. But no, I don't want to talk
Hmm.
about that. I feel like this might be what she wanted to talk about. Like maybe she
Hmm.
wanted to talk about that balance between community and individuality. And like you said, we don't know how, well, like I said, excuse me, but like I said, like there are not a lot of people that know how to have these conversations. And I had to learn how to have these conversations from other people. And it
Hmm.
was a very slow process, just being able to get my mind in order. Because I write a lot. So, like, I'm
Hmm.
always like trying to process stuff, and I'm always trying to like process conversations. Like, some of my favorite songs I've ever written, they came from a good conversation. So, I feel like since a lot of us are discouraged from being artists or discouraged from expressing ourselves, that's how we lose ourselves, and that's how we don't know what we're thinking or how to articulate our thoughts because we're discouraged from having those individual thoughts. And you
Yeah,
can't have those conversations without having your own individual thoughts.
completely agree. Rose, I have two thoughts that I'll
Hmm.
share with you, and then I got a dip for my appointment. But
Yeah.
going back to what you just said in terms of one, how do I have those conversations, right? And I just want to share a tip with people because I believe that these are the kind of conversations that we need to be having. Number one, when we have these conversations, position yourself from a perspective of love, right? It's not about being right or wrong. It's not about trying to be heard and get your point across. It's about listening. It's about understanding, and it's about sharing information, right? That's how these conversations are had in a successful way. The reason that a lot of times that these conversations aren't successful is because people bring, their ego to the conversation. It's about, well, this way is right. And what do you mean? How are you thinking this is right? And that pulls us further off center, right? When we can approach these conversations from a space of love, like I want to hear you out, I'll ask you to hear me out, and then we can find common ground. That's a great place to start these conversations. And then in terms of, for anybody who wants those connections that you were speaking about, you want to build that community where you have these types of connections and conversations, the best advice I could give is to send a request up. Ask the universe, just throw it out there. Hey, I desire these type of people around me, and be as specific as possible. I desire these kind of people around me. Here are the issues that I care about. Here are the things that I want to talk about. Here are the ways that I want to grow. You place that order and then watch these people start to show up in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And like yourself, I have found such a tribe of people here in San Diego. Many people who are logging on right now, so thank you for that. But like, I found just this beautiful, beautiful tribe of people here in San Diego because I place that request. Like God, universe, whatever you call that higher spirit, right? I need these types of connections in my life. And then just watch these people start to show up for you.
Yeah, I mean, manifestation is powerful. I used to write that
Mm-hmm.
down like every morning and afternoon and night to find those people. So I feel you on that 1,000%.
Yeah, legit. All right, Rose, I got to run, but it was nice catching up with you. We'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, you too. I'll talk to you later, Dennis.
All right, take
Love
care.
talking to
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.